This part of the museum refers to the cult of Mithras, and this existed during the 1st century, somewhat into the 3rd century AD, and has the main divinity Mithraism, the god of light and protector of justice and agreement, and it was allied with the cult of the sun god, and it represented apparently the strongest alternative to Christianity. Now notice that headdress is the headdress we saw on some of the relief work on some of the monuments in the Forum yesterday, which I would have associated with Dacian. This was a holy statue of Mithraism. Notice that that's a snake. Its head's on the top of the person and it wraps around. This was found lying horizontal inside of another piece of sculpture, and it was some other totems, and it was thought that it was brought out at different times of the year to restart, if you will, or commemorate the restarting of the various cycles of the seasons. And notice that it's thought to have been gilded. It may also have been painted. Again, what you take from this room is, or what I take from it, is that man has always had alternatives of religion, alternative ways of trying to explain the world that he lived in. That these things sometimes conflicted with mandated religion is the unfortunate part. Now this scene portrays Mithras killing the bull, but notice that it's a sculpture I've seen before in full dimension. I don't remember where. Notice the scorpion doing the unmentionable, the snake trying to get at the blood that's going to come out of the wound from the knife, and the dog, who's not as close as it was in the other sculpture. Over to the right is a little vignette that probably would have meaning if I knew what it was, and the same thing on the left. And notice that here you get an idea of at least a hint of how they were colored, and a little bit of an idea of what it might have been like. These are just more votive offerings that were found near a spring and a fountain. This illustrates the problem of construction in Rome in October 1909 during construction work for an underground parking lot in the Via del Monte near Piazza Cludi. A fountain was discovered that presents 3 inscriptions inserted on the front of a basin, a tank at the back for the intake of a spring, and then all of the stuff that we looked at. Now apparently these pieces of bronze, it looks like, they just look like that, are in fact inscribed there, and the inscriptions apparently contain a curse in Greek against the circus factions, the charioteers, and the 35 team horses. And on the top shelf here are the remains of a book. It looks like it's written on lead, which raises the question, when was the first book? Okay, this part of the museum deals with the early part of Latium development from the south from Rome, apparently. This southern Italy, this area down through here. The Etruscans up in here, and then Greeks and so forth down in here, and how that generally affected Rome. This is interesting. On the left is the Paleolithic, starting 300,000 years ago and before, as evidenced by the mammoth. And you can see the simple stone tool kit there. And then around 120,000 years ago, more advanced tool kits, bigger but shaped like spear points. And then the Mesolithic or Medial period, where humans started to be involved, apparently. between 100,000 and 30,000, and that must include the migration out of Africa. And a little bit better toolkit on the upper part. Notice the use of art in that upper portion there. And then dropping back down in the beginning, the Mesolithic, much better toolkit. Notice there's a hole punch, or an awl, if you will, and a scraper. Use of seashells. 5,500 years ago, pottery. Grain introduced, perhaps migrating up from Mesopotamia. 3,000, 2,000, better pottery. And the Bronze Era. Then back down here again. Notice the circular structure around 1,000 years BC. Much more elegant pottery at 800, more so at 700, and then the more current period. It's hard to overstate how superbly done this museum is, unlike almost anything else I've seen. Not only in Italy for sure, but elsewhere. Here, Italian and English. Then all down this wall, it breaks it out into broad concepts, so we're orientated. Here are the two main grains of wheat and rice. Here illustrating that the northern areas that we're talking about, like where Rome is, volcanic. And then the other brownish is the limestone. This chart describes the demographics, age, and sex. I won't try to decipher it, but basically it's saying that those demographic characteristics reflect the variety of its biological, socioeconomical, and cultural aspects, such as the state of health, capacity for labor, and the adaptation to the environment. The summary is that in this time more women lived at one time than men. The average age was 45. Notice that in the 9th through the 11th through the 9th centuries BC, Rome was up here. All of it was centered around the volcanic area. Notice some large communities, relatively speaking, along the coastal areas. Here it shows at that time the population centers around Rome, Campidoglio, where I was yesterday. The square was the center of political and economic, etc. The Palatino. I think these are burial urns from that period. This is an interesting chart that I can't interpret because it's in Italian, although I can get a hint of it. It breaks out the social structure of these communities at this time between women here, men here, children, young adults, normal adults, and then mature adults, giving the different functions, like there where it says legati, I assume means law. This is a very clever thing. I'm sure they figure by now they've lost most of the English-speaking people, and that's fine. Just to summarize the comment here, in period 4, the process of division in the social classes completed. Wealth serves as the prime indicator of status, reinforcing dominant group images, tombs, blah, blah, blah. Funerary assemblages, private homes with stone walls, that sort of thing. Now we're moving into the hallway that deals with the 700 to 600 BC period. I won't make any attempt to describe in detail anything here, but what you see is simple forms, nicely done, relatively simple design, although some graphic work that's erased by time a bit. It would have made some of these quite pretty, like this one right here. the use of different colored ceramics material. Here again, the extensive use of bronze. This illustration describes the third Latial period, in which these artifacts began to appear in tombs indicating status and wealth. I don't understand the use of the word Orientalizing period. These are literally the remains excavated from specific tombs. Certainly they appear to have been some of the warrior class, those early. It again suggests that during this third Latial period, there was a great increase in creative technological advances in the arts. I assume by that different materials, different methods, colorings, that sort of thing.